Good morning. It is exciting to welcome the Missouri Workers Center here with us this Sunday. This coming Friday, May 1st, is not only commonly known as May Day, but International Workers' Day, where we get to celebrate the beauty of labor and work and the people who produce that labor. We're very, very excited to welcome our neighbors who are just upstairs in our own building, who share our space of justice and equality. If you could give them a warm welcome, then that would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Okay, cool. Well, good morning, everybody. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you to Jared, thank you to Maddie, and thank you to you all for inviting us here, not only to office upstairs, but inviting us here in worship this morning. I want to start just by introducing Tamika Smith, who's here with me. Tamika's been a leader in Stand Up KC and the Missouri Workers Center for a long time. I'll let her tell you a little bit about why she joined the organization. But I do want to say before she speaks that we have a motto in our organization, in our movement, that we have to be willing to do whatever it takes to win. Sometimes that means pushing ourselves past doing things that feel uncomfortable or that we've never done before. For workers, that means being able to do things like go to rallies, go on strike. It's even meant doing things like nonviolent civil disobedience, to put pressure on these billion-dollar corporations or on our elected leaders to do the right thing. And I start with saying this because Tamika is a person, a worker in this movement, a leader who has given definition to that motto, doing whatever it takes to win. Tamika has been on strike, I think, probably a dozen times at this point. She's been arrested doing nonviolent civil disobedience. She's traveled with us out of town. She's marched here in town. She's passed out flyers at local events. Anytime there's an opportunity, Tamika is there. And that's why she's here with us this morning as well. But I just wanted to say you should be proud to get to hear a few words from my dear friend, Tamika Smith.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I want to thank God for allowing me to be here this morning. My name is Tamika Smith. I'm 50 years old. I'm with Stand Up KC and Missouri Workers Center. Have been for over 13 years. Been in this fight for a long time. I have 14 grandkids. We've been fighting for a long time, and I'm fighting for them, so they don't have to go through some of the things I'm going through. For example, when I first started this organization, I was working at Pizza Hut. I was making $7.65 an hour. I was making $7.65 an hour. My lights got cut off. My rent was behind. Didn't know what I was gonna do to figure it out, but I had to figure it out real soon because I have 3 kids of my own. They are now 35, 34, and 29. My youngest daughter is the one who got me involved in this organization. She was working at the Whopper board at the time. She met Daniel, and Daniel got her involved in the movement, so she got me involved. And I've been fighting ever since. But anyway, long story short, we having a big event on May the 1st, and we're trying to get everybody to come out and join. But the reason I'm fighting now is because these billion-dollar companies and corporations do not want to pay us what we're worth. They're trying to silence our voices. They don't want us to be heard. They're trying to redistrict Kansas City. They're trying to make us pay taxes on the stadium. They also then took away our paid sick leave, paid sick days, and that ain't right. It ain't right, but they don't care. But I just here to speak today and let y'all know that we need everybody to come out and join in this fight with us, because without y'all, we can't do it. We cannot do it. More voices, more power is power in numbers, strength in numbers, and we just welcome everybody to come out and join us. Okay? Thank you.
pass these out for those who might be interested. There's flyers about the rally on May 1st and sign-up sheets if you want to get more involved. Please make sure to sign up. Thank you, Tamika, for sharing a little bit of your story. When we were driving here and thinking about what she wanted to say, Tamika, just for those who don't know or maybe have never experienced something like this before, Tamika was saying that, when she first got involved, she couldn't keep up with her utility bill. And she said, so my lights got cut off. But the thing is, we know that it's not just your lights that are powered by your electricity, right? It's your water heater. It's your stove. And so she was describing to me, here we are, 21st century, United States of America, and the richest country in the world, and she was describing to me not just living without electric lights, but not being able to cook at home, having to go to someone else's place to take a warm shower. I share all that to say, here we are, 2026, Kansas City, and these are still the realities for poor and working people. I want to start my remarks, but my name's Daniel Tucker. I'm the political director of the Missouri Workers Center. I'm one of the co-founders, and I want to start just by taking us backwards a little bit and sharing a little history about May Day, about International Workers' Day. That history starts in 1884, when workers got a really good idea, two actually really good ideas. They formed an organization called the Knights of Labor. If you know anything about labor history in America, the Knights of Labor was the first time in American history that we had an interracial union, black workers and white workers, immigrant workers and native-born workers coming together in the same organization at the same time. Anything that had happened before that had been racially divided or white supremacist or exclusive to white members or male members only. They finally got the good sense that actually we're stronger when we come together. The second thing is, they said, and we should not only come together, but we should take action together. In 1884, workers were facing conditions, many of you may remember reading about these things in your history books. Sweatshop labor, factories, right? The 1880s were transitioning out of agriculture and we're moving into this industrial production, this industrial economy. Workers were working 12, 14, 16 hours a day, oftentimes 6 or 7 days a week. And they said, we're often getting up and going to work before our kids are even awake. And then by the time we get home, they're already back to sleep. We have no time for our family. We have no time for hobbies. We have no time for friends. We literally work, sleep, work, sleep. And that's not a life. I don't think that God created this planet for us to live in this way. In fact, Scripture tells us that He gave us this earth and gave us this life that we might have it more abundantly, not to be living in a form of wage slavery. So workers said in 1884, we're giving a deadline to our employers. The deadline is May the 1st, 1886. We're demanding that we want the same rate of pay, because remember, at this time, workers got paid by the day, not by the hour. We want the same rate of pay, but we're only willing to work 8 hours per day. And if you don't give it to us by May 1st of 1886, we're going out on strike. So this was the second big idea that they had, is not only to go on strike, but to do a general strike. In other words, to not just strike at one workplace or the other, one industry or the other, but to strike across workplaces and across industries to say that every worker deserves 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, and 8 hours for what you will, for what you want, right? And we all, here in 2026, owe a credit to those workers because we often think of the 8-hour day as just the norm now. They set a standard. They won a victory that we stand on their shoulders. We take it for granted now that 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, anything past that is time and a half for overtime, right? That was a victory that was won and that was started by these workers in 1886. When they had this general strike, because employers unfortunately didn't heed their demands, they had to learn the hard way, right? So workers went on this general strike all across the United States. Tens of thousands. The epicenter was really in Chicago, which was a real center of industrial production. Tens of thousands of workers out on strike. And of course, they were attacked by the police, by private security hired by employers. And if you're familiar with the violence that took place at Haymarket Square, there was numerous workers who were killed. A bomb goes off behind police lines. To this day, no one knows who threw the bomb. Several police were killed, and 8 people were arrested and blamed for that, who were not even present at the time. They were actually arrested because of their ideas, because they were some of the ones who had called the general strike. There was no evidence actually that connected them to anyone throwing the bomb. 4 of them were executed by the state of Illinois. One of them committed suicide before he could be executed by the state of Illinois. He said he didn't want the government having the right to take his own life. The other 3 were actually exonerated 6 years later by the state of Illinois because it had been such a miscarriage of justice that they were tried with no evidence indicating that they were implicated in the crime. They were tried because of their ideas that all labor deserved dignity, their ideas about what our economy should look like. And so the state of Illinois actually said, not only are they not going to be executed, they were actually released from prison. If only we could take back what they had already done and restore life to those they had already killed. I share some of this history because, yes, we stand on their shoulders, but I share some of that history because today, I have to say, the same struggle continues. Just different names, different policies, different excuses. But what do workers experience today in 2026 right here in Kansas City? Tamika shared with us the realities of working at companies like Pizza Hut and Wendy's, getting up every day and going to work, but struggling just to keep your lights on, struggling to pay your rent. We see here in Kansas City poverty wages in a city where rents keep rising. We see jobs that don't provide health care, where one illness can destroy a family. One preventable disease becomes a death sentence. I read a statistic the other day, if you haven't seen this, that if you compare the richest zip code in Kansas City to the poorest, there's a difference of more than 15 years in life expectancy. And keep in mind, that's 15 years here on the earth that God gave us, and that's also 15 more years of wealth accumulation. So that's not just missed time with your grandchildren, your husband or wife, your friends. It's 15 less years of collecting a Social Security check that you can pass on to your family, right? So this inequality has multiple ripple effects. We see an economy where, as Tamika said, no paid sick days. We voted on it. We passed an increase in the minimum wage. And what did lawmakers do? They showed up after, I just want to say, nothing in 2024 in November. Nothing got more votes than Proposition A. Not Donald Trump, that Missouri voted for in the presidential election. Not Josh Hawley, who Missouri voted for as a United States Senator. Not our governor, not anybody in statewide office got more votes than Proposition A. Raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour, but it also guaranteed every worker would have paid sick days and that the minimum wage would go up with the cost of living. What did our lawmakers in Jefferson City do? They came in immediately that next session. They worked to overturn the will of the people that had been expressed at the ballot box. They took away the paid sick days entirely. Took it away, erased it. They also got rid of the cost of living adjustment to the minimum wage. So the minimum wage did rise to $15 an hour January 1st of this year. Thank you to all of those who have stood with us over the years to help make that a reality. But now it is frozen. Each year as costs go up, the minimum wage will not keep up. I just want to say there are few things that we could say have the level of bipartisan support from Republicans, Democrats, and independents than that the cost of living is absolutely out of control and our wages are not keeping up. So we see politicians in collusion with corporations, overturning the will of the people, attacking workers, taking away paid sick days, forcing people to have to choose between going into work sick or staying home and being able to pay their bills? Raise your hand in here if you want a person with the flu making your burger and fries, serving you your spaghetti, pouring your coffee. Probably none of us, right? But that's the reality in Kansas City because of the choices of our lawmakers. We see also unpredictable schedules, disrespect on the job, right? Racial discrimination, sexual harassment. These are the everyday realities for so many working people. That's not fairness, that's not justice. And the Bible doesn't stay silent about that. In the book of James, it says, look, the wages you have failed to pay the workers are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. Indeed, the cries of workers in Kansas City and all across this country are rising out from kitchens, from warehouses, from behind cash registers, also from the classrooms of their children, from the food pantry lines, and from neighborhoods all across our country that have been left behind. We have to be honest about what we're seeing, and we see it here at Westport on the front steps of this church every day. Dr. King once said, "This country has socialism for the rich and rugged free enterprise capitalism for the poor." If we're honest, that's what we see in Kansas City. Workers are told to tighten their belts, pick themselves up by their bootstraps. Families are told there's no money for housing, no money for health care, no money for buses. Yet we see a proposal from our mayor and our city council to provide massive subsidies to hand over to John Sherman and the Royals for a brand new stadium. Hundreds of millions of public dollars. A $600 million bond, which will cost taxpayers over the 30-year life of that bond, paid back with interest, about $1.2 billion if you assume a 4 to 5% interest rate. The Royals will pay no sales taxes on any of the materials that they purchase, sales or local, state or local, because the city will likely own the stadium on paper, but allow the Royals to have all the benefits of that government ownership. Meanwhile, we have no actual public benefit from it. So the city will own it on paper, but the Royals will do with it as they please. Public money for private wealth. I should say, by the way, the $600 million bond, the $1.2 billion we will lose as Kansas City taxpayers is only the start. The state of Missouri, it looks like, will also give them over $500 million for this. Public money for private wealth. If you wanted to build a home in Kansas City, you think you'd get the same deal? I don't think so. I think you would take out a mortgage, right? And you'd have to pay back the bank with interest over time, right? If you wanted to open a small business, say you had a dream to open a store or a restaurant, right? What would you do? You'd have to use your own money, or you'd have to take out a loan and pay it back with interest. But it turns out if you're a billionaire who wants to build a baseball stadium, those terms that we have to operate under no longer apply. You can just grease the palms of some politicians and voila, a new stadium appears. When it comes to corporations, developers, billionaires, suddenly there's no shortage, no hesitation, no demand that they pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But when it comes to the poor, when it comes to working people, we're always told to wait, work harder, struggle, accept less. It's a double standard. It's a dishonest scale. Scripture names it clearly. It says, "Am I still to forget your ill-gotten treasures? Shall I acquit someone with dishonest scales?" Well, what is ill-gotten treasure if not wealth accumulated while workers cannot meet their basic needs? What is injustice if not a system that rewards those at the top while squeezing those at the bottom ever harder? And I should add, in this instance, the Royals, since the scripture says ill-gotten treasure, our planet was given to all of us. We were called, in the book of Genesis, to be stewards of this planet and all of its abundance. Where did John Sherman get his wealth? But from the destruction of our planet. Through fracking of our earth to obtain natural gas, to sell it back to us so some of us can heat our homes. Those of us with insufficient wages might see our gas getting cut off. Scripture says you've lived on earth, in the book of James it says you've lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have hoarded wealth. The wages you failed to pay are crying out against you. We have to say honestly that this system doesn't only exploit workers, it doesn't only leave some with so much and others with so little. It seeks to divide us as well. How else can you uphold a system in which some have more than they could possibly use and others lack the basics? Well, they have to keep us divided. So in the boardrooms and in the positions and halls of power, they point at our immigrant brothers and sisters and siblings and say it's their fault. Say they're to blame. Oftentimes, these immigrant workers are doing some of the hardest work for the lowest pay, denied basic and fundamental protections some of the rest of us take for granted. They fear even getting around right now. Fear driving their kids to school. Fear going to the laundromat. Fear driving to work. Fear of detention. But also, what does detention mean? Fear of separation from your family, from your friends. Fear of deportation back to a country that you may not know or even call home, a language you may not speak. Agencies like the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, they've turned our communities into places of fear instead of safety. I'm reminded of the scripture from Exodus 23:9 says, "You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the heart of a stranger, seeing you were strangers in the land of Egypt." There's nothing just about exploiting immigrant labor while criminalizing immigrant lives. There's nothing moral about tearing families apart while benefiting from their work, and I should say from their taxes. Because despite the accusation, immigrants are oftentimes paying taxes and yet not receiving the benefits of those taxes. They don't get Medicare. They don't get Social Security. They don't get Medicaid, right? May Day is International Workers' Day. It's always belonged to workers. It's always belonged to immigrant workers too, because as I said, that was the beginning of unity in organized labor. Labor has always been most powerful when it is lived under its motto that an injury to one is an injury to all. It has been the weakest when it has allowed itself to be most divided. So today, in 2026, and this May 1st, we seek to stand firmly in that tradition. We stand with immigrant workers and say, you're not alone. In fact, you're one of us. You're part of the working class. In fact, indeed, you're part of America. You're home here. We stand and say communities should not be places of safety and should be places of safety, not fear. We say that ICE has no place in tearing apart our neighborhoods. And we stand and say we are ready to take action. It's time for an economy that puts workers first, that puts workers over billionaires. I would argue, I'm not sure that anybody earns $1 billion. $1 billion is only accumulated through the exploitation of somebody else's work, of somebody else's effort. We stand to say that we want ICE out of our communities because we're called to welcome the stranger. The beautiful words that we ought to revisit from our Statue of Liberty, from Emma Lazarus, says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your hungry, huddled masses, yearning to breathe free." Right? If we're honest about this nation's history, we would have to say, we all came from somewhere else. Other than the Native Americans, everybody. Whether you look back 1 generation, 2, 3, or 4, or 5, started out somewhere else. Or if you didn't, someone in your distant past come here seeking a better life, maybe your ancestors came here stolen to uphold somebody else's better life. Stolen from the shores of Africa. We have to be honest, that is the history of this country. And how ironic that those same ancestors would now close the doors for those coming in behind them. It's time that we get organized enough to change these things. We can't simply identify these problems. We have to do something about them. We see our nation being taken apart piece by piece, our democracy being taken apart. We see it at the federal level. We see it at the state level. The will of the people being overturned. We even see it here at the local level. You might be saying, Daniel, didn't we already vote on this stadium situation? And we did. But they've gone now behind closed doors to try to get what they want over the will of the people. That's not a healthy democracy. It's not a healthy economy. When we give away our public dollars, honestly, just an aside, this is not in my prepared remarks, there are fewer than 1,000 people, fewer than 1,000 people in the United States of America that have the privilege to call themselves a billionaire. If we can't make a billionaire pay his own way, a person who is the most capable of doing so in this society, what are we doing? And at what cost? To our public school system, to our roads, to our bridges, to our healthcare, to our hospitals. It's time that we say we're not powerless to stop this or change it. In fact, we hear from Scripture that somehow when 2 or 3 come together, the Spirit is there. And I still remember this miracle of the loaves and the fishes. Something happens when people start to say, I've got a little bit that I can contribute. Well, I've got a little bit I can contribute to. And all of a sudden, the little bit from each of us turns into something big, something abundant, something that can feed everybody. In that call and response earlier, we often hear, because the quote from Micah, to let the righteousness roll down like a mighty stream, right? Have you ever felt that feeling of a stream washing over, of just an abundance from a waterfall or something like that? We have that. That feeling that you have as an individual when you feel that stream, that sense of abundance and washing over you, that's what our society should feel like for all of God's children. But right now, it feels like the drip, drip, drip of wondering if there'll be enough water to drink for so many. So let's change that, Westport Presbyterian. Let's change that, Kansas City. We're asking you to join us on May 1st in Washington Square Park, a location that was chosen for 2 reasons, I should say. One, as I think many of you know, that is exactly the area where they want to build this brand new stadium and make us pay for it without getting to vote on it. We'll see if we can do something about that. But I should say, for those who don't know, that the building directly across the street from Washington Square Park is also the federal immigration court on the 5th floor. Every day, our immigrant brothers and sisters and siblings are being dragged in there, having to report, keeping their fingers crossed, sending their prayers up, that they're not going to be dragged out in chains. And every day, unfortunately, many of them are. Read a report that Kansas City is one of the #1 airports for deporting immigrants in chains back to other countries. Some hoping that they're going back to their home country and not winding up in a prison in El Salvador. But this is our Kansas City. We have a voice. We get to say so. And so we're coming together on Friday, May 1st. Somebody say Friday, May 1st. Friday, May 1st. At 5:30 p.m. Somebody say 5:30 p.m. At Washington Square Park. We're coming together because if we gather together, if we build our strength in numbers, we can change this. When we first started organizing for $15 an hour as a minimum wage, fighting to get a union in the fast food industry, people, I'm not joking, friends, not just enemies, told us we were crazy. It would never happen. But I remember another scripture that says, with faith, even like a mustard seed, it can sprout. And the part of the story is that a mustard seed, it actually grows into a huge bush, right? If we have that same faith, and if we put behind that our actions, if we put behind that our prayers, our efforts, our struggle, we can make that bloom into something big and beautiful. We can make that righteousness actually roll down like a mighty stream. We can actually have a Kansas City, a Missouri, a Kansas, a United States that's a land of justice, liberty, and justice for all. So I encourage you, please join us on Friday, May 1st at 5:30. I think it's going to be a beautiful day. And for those who are able, we'll march after the rally speaking program, but don't feel obligated if you're not up for it physically. Appreciate you for having us here, and thank you so much.